What's the best example of "Welp, society is fucked"?
When I lost 3 of my closest family members to a drunk driver accident, and I couldn't get time off work to plan and go to their funeral because you need to find coverage, and if nobody will cover for you, you have to come in. Yeah, none of my coworkers wanted to cover my shift. This happened very recently also, uneasy face. Edit, a lot of people asked if I went to the funeral. I did, and I'm so happy I did. It RLY helped me find some closure and take some time with my family. I'm going to request time off to see the motherfucker who hit them get sentenced, and if they won't let me go, I simply won't show up again. I also politely told my manager to F***ck off and that he can fire me if he isn't happy with my decision to attend, still not fired.
First off, I'm sorry for your loss. When my wife's grandfather passed, I was not going to be able to leave for the funeral. Retail job during Christmas. I was told it was not my family, so tough crap. I point blank told the manager I was going, she could decide if I came back employed. While they miraculously found coverage after I told them that, it also told me who I was working for. Left a few months later.
I saw a news story of a high school student paying off a teacher's student loans.
Oh, how the turntables.
Pretty much any ER in any major city. Spend a few days in one and see just how incredibly fucked up a significant percentage of the population is.
I think about my friends, family, and colleagues, and I cannot name a single person who does not have a malady or 6. Depression, anxiety, stomach ulcers, heart issues, etc.
Given how complex our bodies are, and brains, I marvel we don't have even more things going wrong with us. Stagnation of wages since the 1980s combined with increased cost of living in the 400% mark in key areas, such as rent and food. Future's pretty bleak.
One example, I resigned from a job in 2007. The company was sold, the job still exists, but the people working it now, almost 16 years later, get paid less now than I did then. Significantly less, something like $10 per hour less.
2/3 of wealth created throughout COVID went to the top 1%. Income inequality is going to be the downfall of civilization eventually.
This is how all revolutions start.
People mindlessly believing propaganda that is easily disproven by a 10-second Google search.
For real. People just take what they were told by some random-ass person and hold on to it with their dear life, no matter how obviously false it is. 2020 as a year was pretty bad.
3 years ago now, yet the shit's still coming from it.
The fish fillets are getting smaller, but staying the same price. If ocean ecosystems are no longer able to sustain consistently harvesting large fish, that shows deep problems that cannot be covered up. Couple that with the cost of the most poor, staple foods increasing while wages stagnate, and you have a perfect recipe for societal collapse. People are kept docile by all governments with bread and circuses. Well, alas, the bread is getting more expensive and has for decades, while the circuses kinda suck and are rapidly going bankrupt. I have been recently rereading Asimov's Foundation and his discussion of how powerful empires collapse through a gradual shrinking of ambition and will until all that the smartest are trying, and failing, to achieve is maintenance of the status quo was rather disconcerting. Sound familiar to anyone else working in the public sector?
There's a theory going around that we are systematically making fish smaller through only catching the larger fishes. There are rules that you have to release smaller individuals. Since the smaller fishes survive, they get to reproduce. The idea is that larger fishes have lived a longer life, and the smaller fishes should be able to reproduce. But all the smaller fishes are not automatically the youngest.
Gestures broadly at everything all the time.
There it is again, that funny feeling.
Some kid at my school got bullied into suicide because of a haircut. I didn't know him that well, but from what I've heard, he used to be very popular with girls because of his good looks, mainly hair. One day he showed up to school with a buzz cut. The same girls that were all over him not too long ago started making fun of him every day for it. Even his girlfriend left him because of his haircut. Everyone ignored him just because of it. Eventually, I noticed that he hasn't been going to school, so out of curiosity, I asked around and found out that he had committed suicide. Apparently, those girls started to bully him and send him death threats over social media, while he didn't even do anything. The bullying got so far that the poor boy just couldn't take it anymore. This happened a year ago, and people still mention it from time to time. What's even worse is that those girls never even got punished for it. The police thought he was simply just depressed and that drove him to do it. There was no evidence that the girls bullied him. After that incident, I've honestly lost all hope in society.
That is terrifying.
When a 6-year-old brings a gun to school and shoots the teacher during class.
Which time? For me, it was discovering Epstein Island and the following cover-up.
Funny how everyone also forgot about the Panama Papers as well.
That we are browbeaten into actively participating in the delusions of crazy people instead of being free to ignore them.
If everyone knows this, then we could all just literally stand up and walk away, and then there wouldn't really be any power. It's crazy to think that society exists on such a thin thread that could snap any moment. There is really nothing stopping everyone from starting the apocalypse other than listening to these wackos. Corporations are on a never-ending quest to maximize profits without any regard to the planet or its inhabitants. And they're going to keep getting better at it. When I saw how everyone reacted to the COVID-19 outbreak, turning health issues into political ones, that basically cinched it.
Not just health issues, but most issues. COVID-19 basically pulled the already draping curtain that was somewhat hiding how shit the world has become.
Don't ever read about child soldiers in Africa. Ever.
I know the exact moment I realized this. It was during the Republican debate in 2015. I forget who made a comment about Trump's hand size in a suggestive manner. Trump responded by saying there's no problem there. Think about that during a presidential debate arguing about literal dick size, and no one batted an eye. That's when I knew.
I recently saw an old video of RFK in '64 answering a bunch of questions from Columbia students ahead of his run for Senate. He was quoting Pericles off the cuff. I felt like I was seeing a video from a different planet.
The fact that human rights are negotiable.
Even the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the UN has a clause saying that any of the rights outlined can be ignored if the government decides it's for the good of society. Of course, the language is much more flowery, and it's probably a necessary evil so that things like prisons can exist. It's still frightening that despite all our talk of human rights in our enlightened era, it can still all be denied on the whim of whichever regime is in power.
This might be an unpopular opinion, and possibly a very American thing, but it blows my mind how comfortable people are with the suffering of others. What's more, an alarming number of people seem to revel in it. I know the world has always been deeply unkind, and I've always been mostly pessimistic, but even I had been able to see little moments of hope here and there to keep me going. Just feels like joy is drying up, and it's a real bummer.
Not just the joy, but also the empathy. People voting against their best interests due to tribalism and owning the other political party. People not protesting when they are being shat on.
People blindly believing anything that is said by one side or another and using it as absolute fact, even if it's complete bullshit and easily disputed. Sad part is, most people are so caught up in the this side versus that side crap, they don't even realize that in most cases, it's really us versus them.
Some crosswalks in Seoul, and I assume other cities, have lights on the ground that turn green when it's safe to cross because so many people are glued to their phones and wouldn't see the signals otherwise.
People always talk about 1984 in Brave New World when thinking of dystopias, and rightly so, but I think Walter Tevis' Mockingbird is really underrated. It's a society where privacy is king, to the point where it's unthinkable to interrupt or bother another person, and everyone has retreated into their own headspace. Nobody knows how anything works, nobody can read. Everyone just gets content pushed to them as the species slowly dies off. Good times.
People screaming, yelling, and shutting those who they disagree with even when, sometimes, they're speaking truth. People are more afraid of being wrong than they are concerned about the greater good of this world.
In that same vein, people who can't just listen to one another cause they're so focused on appearing to know the most that they don't even hear what you're communicating. What world could we even have without taking the time to listen and respond instead of just talking at everyone else?
I have my list. Asterisk Americans are so politically divided that we sit around and argue about the absolute dumbest shit. How about actually staying focused and dealing with bigger issues? Like how wages are stagnated, or housing prices are fucked, or how public transportation is absolute dog's hit, or how everybody is being fucked by medical corporations. Asterisk young people are afraid of everything, and rightly so. They are afraid of not being able to be successful because they live in a hyper-competitive, unforgiving world. Back when I was younger, you could still fuck up in high school and your young adult life and come around eventually. Now, everybody knows, tracks, digitizes, and records everything. So that ticket you got for drinking when you were 16 fucks you hard. And fighting in school? What used to be a schoolyard tussle over is assault, there's a lawsuit, and kids get arrested and a record for shit that hardly registered when I was younger. And when they do get to be adults, they can't buy homes because some dickhead corpos decided to buy up everything, and NIMBYs refuse to allow low-cost housing of any kind, and people who are not NIMBYs want to preserve old 20th century low-density crap like 1920s single-family homes because a city might lose its character from an old random house. Not only that, but it's also harder and harder and harder to get good jobs that have benefits even with a proper education. Young people can't start families because everything costs so goddamned much. Just go see how much rent, childcare, and baby food is. Their lives are monitored on social media constantly, and if you say the wrong thing just once, you are cancelled and can never learn or grow from it. Asterisk no third spaces. We work and hang out at home, but go nowhere. That bodes poorly for a society when people can't find a place to just be social, even with an activity. Asterisk America is a shitty, stressful place, some of which stems from the points above. So people get stressed, wig out when something problematic does happen, or they just stew until they snap, and people get hurt. There are mass acts of violence and we just say a prayer and move on, and the politicians and media pundits can't be fucked to find a solution beyond gun regulation, which in this country is basically like trying to drain the ocean with a bucket. And that's to say nothing of people using trucks and stuff.
And GT, Americans are so politically divided that we sit around and argue about the absolute dumbest shit. How about actually staying focused and dealing with bigger issues? Like how wages are stagnated, or housing prices are fucked, or how public transportation is absolute dog's shit, or how everybody is being fucked by medical corporations. Politicians, the corporations that sponsor, or rather, own, them, and the corporate media, are all purposefully pitting the American public against itself so it remains ignorant and distracted from the bigger issues. That also leaves us more and more powerless to rise up and take back power from said politicians and corporations so they can continue their corruption and keep us all held face down by their hooves in the name of profit.
Any current news article.
The fact that sex offenders and pedophiles get less time in prison than people who deal and use drugs. That pretty much draws the line for me.
The person that molested me when I was 13 to 14, he was in his 40s BTW, and I served the same amount of time, smiley face. He got 2 years for his actions. I was in mental health hospitals under Section 3 for 2 years. For those that don't know, that means I was detained under the Mental Health Act and had many of my rights stripped away. In fact, I believe he was released a bit early. Not trying to trauma dump or anything, just trying to show people how messed up the justice system is. He's not even on the sex offender registry anymore. Apparently molesting a child doesn't matter when you did it 7 years ago.
Trash is found at the highest mountain peak and lowest ocean trench. We are beyond fucked. You will own nothing and be happy.